Live from the Dexa Arcade Channel Studios in London, United Kingdom. Available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. You're listening to The Movie Penny Show with your hosts, Dexa and Hippie. You're listening to The Movie Penny Show with your hosts, Dexa and Hippie.
Good morning, everyone, and we are back. This is Dex here. I'm joined again by Hippie.
Howdy.
Brilliant introduction. And today we are going to be talking about movies. Specifically, Hippie had a movie she wanted to sell me after last time. The last time I spent about 2 hours torturing her about Nicolas Cage, even though she didn't want to actually watch the movie, and she said she's only going to watch it on Netflix, on a day when it came out, and she wasn't really doing anything else. She decided now she's going to do the same to me with a movie she's seen before. Of course, Hippie's taste in movies, stems from her love of the 50s and 60s and all of the cultural norms that exist.
I'm going to have to jump right in right now, okay? If I'm going to be disrespected, I will not be disrespected by someone who is 8 years older than I am, okay? Number two, I have a love for cinema. I have a love for cinema of all genres, all areas, all makes, all kinds, all decades. So it's not the 60s and 70s. In fact, it's my decade of choice for films would be the 90s, which, coincidentally, is where this film comes from.
And which, coincidentally, is also the time... God, what was that? What was that director's name? The guy who made those loads of disaster movies?
That does not narrow anything down.
He made Independence Day.
I can't remember.
You remember.
No. Independence Day was... No. Independence Day was Emmerich, wasn't it?
Yeah, Roland Emmerich, yeah. So basically...
That's it, Roland.
Yes, so you have a love of Roland Emmerich movies. Alright, moving on. Okay, so today, Hippie's going to be selling me a movie from the late 90s known as... I've actually forgotten the name already.
Well,
Still
I'll
Crazy.
tell you what then. Yeah, maybe this is my takeover point. So, a little bit of history for people who don't necessarily get access to British cinema. This is one of the examples of the 90s British cinema boom that we had over here that was mainly sponsored by our national lottery or the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. They made a lot of films, one of which I'm sure a lot of people know about because it internationally blew up, is The Full Monty, which you can now catch on Disney+. This film came just at the end of that run, just as we were coming towards 2000. Still Crazy. It was released in 1999. The director of the film is Brian Gibson, and he is known for films internationally like and don't judge, okay, Moody?
I'm listening.
Okay, don't judge. What's Love Got to Do with It? The Tina Turner film. He made that. To be fair, What's Love Got to Do with It is a great film about Tina Turner, so no judgment. He also is the guy who directed... Yeah, he's the guy who directed... you know the song Mr. Roboto?
Yeah.
He directed the music video for that, and the music video for I Wanna Know What Love Is.
He's on side.
So, credible director, I know, but the writers are the thing that kind of sell this, because it was Dick Clement and Ian Frenay. And in the UK, they're known as writers of shows that we fundamentally hold dear. So things like Porridge. Internationally, they would have been known for writing shows like Killing Bono. They wrote the film Killing Bono. Across the Universe. And most notably, Flushed Away, starring Hugh Jackman. And I think it was Kate Winslet as the other rat. I can't remember. I know at one point Shane Ritchie turned up as a toad. Oh yeah, and Ian McKellen's in it. It's a good film. So the main thing is the actors in this movie as well. It's one of those movies that just has every face that someone who grew up in the UK during the 90s would have seen. So you've got people like Bill Nighy, who obviously went on to play the vampire demon daddy in the Underworld series. He's been Davy Jones. He's been in the first and second Marigold Hotels. And he played Rufus Scrimgeour in Harry Potter. The cast also consists of Stephen Rea, and if anyone is a fan of V for Vendetta, they will recognise him. Jimmy Nail, who was in the 90s quite a prolific music writer. He got pretty far writing a few cool hits. Kind of dropped off the map, don't really know what happened to him. Billy Connolly, I mean, we all know who the Big In is, but for anyone who doesn't, he's a actor, comedian, lunatic,
hippie,
nudist, Scottish
hippie
person. Yeah.
Look, I personally like Bill Nighy, but like telling me Bill Nighy in this film is not really going to sell me on this film, because Bill Nighy was also in Underworld, and that didn't really make it a good film. So, can we get to what makes it a good film?
But he was also in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies as Davy Jones, and that made it a good film. He was a good Davy Jones.
He was a passable Davy Jones. He kind of
okay. We've also got like Timothy Spall, and you can't hate on Timothy Spall. The man was great. I mean, he was so. He also a Harry Potter alumni. Timothy Spall has been in movies such as Sweeney Todd. He played Beadle. If you've ever seen a film called Mr. Turner about the artist Turner, he was Turner. He's a British face. You see him a lot in films. I talk as if he's not alive. He is still very much alive. And he's been in quite a few international movies as someone who people will recognise when they see him. Most notably, he's Wormtail in Harry Potter. And I think he crops up in Alice in Wonderland as well. But basically, I'm trying to set up the fact that this is a very British movie. But it's about overarching themes. So the movie is about a band who in the 70s was so close to making it huge. They are a British, psychedelic rock style band, reticent of sort of Genesis and especially Pink Floyd. And there's even a character in it that's very similar to the idea of what happened to Syd Barrett from Pink Floyd. This band broke up after a particularly calamitous gig. And they all go their separate ways. And it's about the idea of 20 years on, can this band actually pull their heads out of their asses and make it big? And obviously they're all a little older. And they've all got aching joints and they don't necessarily do as much as they used to, but it's one of these heartwarming films where we go through and we see the band become what is a band. It comes off of the back of films like This Is Spinal Tap. But it's more about the heart and the acting and the quality of the music in the film that makes it such an amazing movie to watch. So that's a little sum up. How does that sound so far?
It sounds like a documentary. Very dry documentary.
But a lot of those... it's definitely not one of those. But it is based off of a lot of films that came out of bands that were put back, that did that. So it's that sort of ilk of film, but it is more fictional. The band is very much fictional, sadly. Funnily enough, this film predates... So Bill Nighy was in Love Actually. Everyone that has had to sit through that movie every Christmas and Easter in the UK would have seen him in Love Actually. He plays the washed-up rock star. And this film is where he basically lifted that entire character. Washed-up rock star who still thinks he's in his early 20s and can do whatever, but he's actually in his 50 pluses. And he brings a lot of comedy into it because he particularly is clean. So he stopped taking drugs and everything. He's the stereotypical old rocker. So he's got a younger wife who's white, blonde, and from somewhere in Scandinavia, who's also terrifying, but also terrifyingly loyal. But the linchpin of the story, funnily enough, isn't his character. He's just a very large part of it. The linchpin is a character called Tony, who's working in Spain. No one knows what Tony does. It's all a mystery. He's got a job out in Spain that turns out to be he refills condom machines. And he bumps into the son of the person who originally put on the disastrous gig, Whiz Beach, which is actually a rock festival in the UK, at Whiz Beach. And he says, look, can you guys come back for the 20th anniversary gig? And it's Tony going around trying to rally the band back together. The classic trope of one guy goes and finds the female lead, her name's Karen, and she's working in hotels.
Yep,
and we have some lovely moments where we see a bit of 90s misogyny. You know, her getting patted on the arse and told to do what she's supposed to do, just do her job and put up with all sorts of crap. So she's gone from being basically a band groupie for the problematic, drug-addled guitarist, Brian, whose brother was the original singer in the band and dies of an overdose. So he gets replaced by Bill Nighy's character, Ray, from this point on. And that's one of the key reasons they really fell apart. It had nothing to do with problems with a gig. It was because none of them could get on. There's a rift between the bassist and the drummer, the keyboardist and the lead singer. And we're just sort of exploring those relationships. But I mean, it's a comedic movie. It's got that heartwarming feeling when the band finally does make it. It's very reminiscent of actual life for a lot of these bands when they get back together and then reappear, that we don't necessarily remember until they release a new hit. So I believe bands like Squeeze and Pink Floyd and The Police, when they come back out of what is semi-retirement, it's that sort of idea of getting back into the swing of things, going on gigs that are slightly subpar, normally in arse end of Europe areas. So, for instance, they have a gig on a boat in Hughie. So obviously calamity ensues when they accidentally nearly sink the boat.
How did they nearly sink the boat?
Well, they decide they're going to do one of their more punchy hits. And up until this point, and for most of the movie, Ray is struggling to be a lead singer again. So he's, as they put it, he's not got the balls since he stopped doing drugs. He's become a bit of a, recluse. And he decides, nope, we're going to do it. We're going to do it at full volume. We're going to do it the way we always used to do it, etc. Only problem is to do a big rock song on a tiny boat. It can't be an anthem. And that's what that song is. And he ends up raising his mic stand and knocking a pipe. And everyone gets gassed off the boat because he breaks the pipe. He later goes on to find a very dodgy looking chap who turns out to be Mackenzie Crook, who later becomes one of his crewmates in Pirates of the Caribbean, funnily enough. But a very young Mackenzie Crook sells him some drugs, and he ends up taking them and falling into an icy river, nearly dies. And then has a sort of epiphany moment. And that's when the band starts to start working together because they get over their own shit. Excuse me. It's a movie that you can sit there and put on and just for the sake of feeling good. The music is really above par. They worked really hard. It's obvious that the music writers were from, bands of that era. They based the music style on things like Pink Floyd and all that. So if you're a fan of rock, it's a great movie to watch. It hits it's not the sort of movie you go to for like non-stop action and things. It's not that kind of a film. It's a very, as I say, it's a British film. It's got that level of subtle nuance that some films don't necessarily have.
Like, to be honest, it sounds kind of depressing. It's the wrestler, right? Darren Aronofsky's. Yeah, it kind of sounds like that.
Yeah.
It's like this bittersweet thing, where an old hat is refining his passion, and
I'd say you could compare it to The Wrestler in a sense of the beat structure of the story. But if you wanted to compare it to another film, it would also fit the scope of something like, I did say earlier, this is Spinal Tap, about a band, but also in terms of the style of comedy, the Full Monty. It's a very similarly structured film where there is comedy. It is a comedy, but it's not constant laughs. It's not, a constant barrel of laughs. It's more like you're watching for, the bigger moments. And you sit there and by the end of the film, you're rooting for this band. You fall in love with this band and you want them to do well. You want them to get over their shit and actually succeed. And it looks like at the end of the film, they're going to do that. There's this lovely moment, in fact, where they all finally get on stage. We find out that Brian, who up until 2/3 of the film, we assume died. Brian actually is living in a mental health facility by choice, and he returns to the band as a guitarist, and they're all performing at the festival, and the clouds start to roll in, these big black thunderous clouds, like there's going to be lightning that will hit the stage, and because that's what happened before, and it looked like it's all going to happen all over again. And Karen, who's been ups and downs with this band, finally got them here, looks up into the sky and goes, "Don't you dare." And the clouds just clear. So it's that sort of slightly cheesy comedy. We've got a lot of playing on the stereotypes that we would see, the stereotypes we assume of members of a band, especially of members of a rock band. So you've got your flamboyant, over the top, preening lead singer who thinks he's all that in a bag of chips and won't take advice from other people. You've got the moody guitarist in the background who kind of wished he had the chops to be a lead singer but can't. Great at what he does, but not at being a lead. And then you've got my favourite character, played by Timothy Spall, Beano. And he is the drummer. And every stereotype that you could think of about drummers, it's pretty much Beano. He's fat, balding, drinks too much, works in a nursery with plants. In fact, he has an extensive knowledge about how to look after plants and how to grow certain plants. And he is on the run from the taxman to the tune of like £100,000 for what he says is bad investments. So he's constantly being chased around Europe by the taxman. And we discover at the end of the film that it wasn't the taxman who was chasing him. It was Frances Barber, who is another English actress face that a lot of people growing up in England would have seen. Turns out that she is, in fact, a rebellious young woman who, when she first went and saw the band in the 70s, snuck out and was punished by her Christian father. And when asked, "What do you want from me then?" by Beano, her response is quick, violent sex. So it's, it doesn't... My explanation doesn't do it much justice, but it's that sort of film. It's that sort of silly, slightly cheesy romp, really. I guess is the best way to describe it.
So you'd basically say that the trailer is false advertising, essentially?
A little bit. The trailer does make... I think the trailer, considering it was made in the late 90s, I think they were trying to springboard this film into notoriety and make it a big film, and it just never got there, and that's a real shame. But I mean, I think it was dwarfed because 99 saw some heavy-hitting films. And, I think it kind of got pushed to the wayside a little, and because it's a British film, it sort of died a sad, quiet.
I mean, they did kind of push a lot of those type of comedy films in the 90s that had that British flavor, like Calendar Girls, but they never really found their audience at the time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them have been able to come back in retrospect, a bit like, as funnily enough, you gave the perfect example of Calendar Girls, which has come back so strongly that it now has a musical in the West End and in Broadway. So it's that sort of film. It deserves its revival, to be honest. It deserves more people to go away and watch it.
I mean, it was really good at the time as well. It's just this thing, like, where... like the more I'm listening to it, the more, like, I can understand it's good, but I think it's one of those films where it's like you have to watch it to understand how good it is, because being told that it's good doesn't really bring that across. And I think the trailer itself just kind of shows you, like, the laugh out loud moments, and you're basically, if you go in expecting that, you're going to be highly, highly disappointed. Because when I saw Full Monty, I was expecting it to be like a straight up comedy, and it really wasn't.
Yeah. And this film is billed as similar, and it's that sort of beat structure. So it's not you're laughing every minute, but every now and again it's going to catch you, and you're going to go, and you're going to find yourself laughing your head off. But there is a lot of gravity behind some of the acting. It's so well put together, and it's so knowledgeable of that era, that band, of getting older. of all those issues around that. And it's one of those feel-goods, so you do have to kind of watch it to get those reactions, as it were.
Alright, so making a comparison, right? Okay, so supposing I would say Magic Mike is the American version of Full Monty, because it literally is, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it really, really is, and it...
What would you say?
If you're saying, what would I say the comparison is with Still Crazy, there was a film that starred Rainn Wilson. And it's slightly different because he has to go and remake a band. And it's called The Rocker. And that film hits with a dash of School of Rock. Because that also is a film where it was billed as being just out and out laugh a minute. And it's not. It's a well-structured comedy film without it being constant yucks. You know what I mean? So that's the sort of film, I guess.
I'm actually trying to think of like other band films. Let's see.
The funniest thing is it's weird because there are so many of them.
I know.
But then when you actually sit down to try and work out what they are, you can't remember them. And I think that is also a problem with this film. I think it got kind of swallowed up in that genre of the band that didn't make it trying to make it. And there's so many films that are of that ilk where someone's trying to make it big.
And
at the end they do.
I think they would have probably been better off just advertising it as like a British version of Spinal Tap, because Spinal Tap was very loud. It was very it was very rock and roll at the time, and in terms of British rock, this sounds a lot more subdued.
Yeah, to be honest, I would not be surprised at all if sitting there one day with at least a cast member or someone, they go, yeah, it is basically British Spinal Tap. If Spinal Tap hadn't been a mockumentary and it had all been British and they were actually British rather than the actors putting on British accents, then yeah, that would be this sort of film.
Well, to be fair, like American movies can't really have British humor. I mean, you just need to watch the American version of Coupling to get an idea of how that works.
Please don't. That doesn't exist. We're going to ignore that it exists. No, it doesn't.
They literally recycle.
There's no American Coupling. I understand that people like the American Office, but I'm in two minds. That barely exists.
They literally recycled all the jokes and the dialogue, and it just didn't work.
Just no. Plus, no offense to our American listeners, you're all lovely, I'm sure.
No, all the offense to
how you can't understand what the giggle loop is, I can't. The giggle loop, it's important. You must understand. It's easily, one of the most relatable things on the planet. When you get stuck in a giggle and you can't get out, and then you pull people in, and you're stuck in the giggle loop.
Please watch Coupling for an explanation of what the giggle loop is. We will not explain it to you. Neither will we explain why the word lesbos is funny.
Definitely come back. Ignore the fact that America may or may not, in my view, made a remake. Go and watch the original Coupling from the Beeb. It's fantastic. So funny.
There will be never anyone like Jeff in the world ever.
Sadly, no.
And the world is sadder for it. Yes. Moving on. Alright, so I forgot the name again. It's like I keep on thinking of Crazy Girls every time I think of the name.
See, it's still crazy. And one of the biggest problems is when people go to search this movie, they will either get the Foreigner song, which is The Flame Still Burns, which is not a Foreigner song. So I'm going to jump in with this because it is actually a bugbear of mine. Foreigner have actually done really well with this song called The Flame Still Burns. Foreigner released it early noughties, I believe, something like that. It is stolen from this film. And they made it crap. And I don't understand why they did it. The Flame Still Burns in the film Still Crazy is a song with so much meaning behind it because it is pivotal in the film. The bitter guitarist Les writes that song and only wanted the original singer Keith to sing it. He cannot stand how Ray does it, so he doesn't let him use it. And it's alluded to throughout the film. It's one of them ones, and at the end, not only is Les allowed to perform as lead singer while Ray backs him up, so you've got that warm heart moment where the two main loggerheads join forces and become an ultra unit, but it's also a really well-written rock song. And Foreigner went away and made it quite big, but took all of that additional emotion and all of that stuff, took it out of the song. So it was like, I'm annoyed. And they never really said, look, guys, we got it from this film. And it's not like any of them contributed to the writing of this song. So it really does annoy me. Go back and watch the film that this song was lifted from. Like, allegedly lifted from.
Are you going to break into karaoke now?
No. Okay. But it is a great song. And also with Still Crazy, people will ask you, don't you mean Stir Crazy? Which, no, that was one of those films that was Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. And although I love both actors individually, it
wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't. It was one of many films they made that just was not very good.
Well, to be honest, I'm probably the only person in the world that likes See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Because a lot of people hate that film, but apparently I like it quite a bit.
I've heard a lot of people criticise it. I mean, as a film just to watch, it's really not that bad. But it's not the sort of film where you're going into with high expectations, nor should you.
No, definitely not. Like I don't think it's amazing or anything, but it's definitely a good time, and I do like... I still love that scene where Richard Pryor's on the train and his sister's like, God, what are people going to think of a black man standing on the train like this? He's like, you mean I'm not white? Why didn't you tell me? Does mom know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that scene now.
I mean...
I'm not white! Yeah, no, you're quite right, actually. That film does get a bit of a bad ride. But, the thing about this, the thing about Still Crazy is I think it's best summed up. The entire film is foreshadowed and summed up in the first few lines of it's a monologue. The narrator of the film, who occasionally pops up, is Billy Connolly. He's the roadie for the band and was the roadie for the band back then.
Okay.
And he's a funny enough character anyway. And we even get the rare treat that not a lot of people get of Billy Connolly playing the banjo and singing in this film. When they're all sitting on the tour bus, you get a rare treat of Billy Connolly singing an old rambling song, which was quite cool. The first thing that he says to us as viewers is history teaches us that men behave wisely once they've exhausted all other alternatives. For most rock bands, the pursuit of wisdom is a low priority compared to fame, fortune, and fornication. Such a band was Strange Fruit. So it harks to the entire rest of it. That's the mood of the film that you are going to be watching. High class silliness.
All right. So, important question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a happy ending?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And it's one of those films where it's one of those Breakfast Club fist in the air moments where you're like, yes, they did it. And it was good. And then for the next week, you're whistling The Flame Still Burns.
Yes, they didn't die of arthritis. Okay.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, none of them conked out on stage. The bloke who we thought was dead is back. There's quite a nice thing as well where I might have been his first film. But Hans Matheson plays the newest addition to the band. Because Brian's died, they think, they need a new guitarist to cover him. And he's one of these... I mean, for people who don't know, one of the key things about the band Pink Floyd is that Syd Barrett, who was an amazing songwriter and guitarist, bowed out of the band. There was a lot of mystery and intrigue and all sorts around that, and was taken over by guitarist David Gilmour, who'd sort of been in the background of the band the whole time. And it's basically that now. So they reckon Brian's died, so they've replaced him with the character played by Hans Matheson, Luke. And he's one of these young rock stars who thinks he's all that. Got a swagger on him. And it just so happens that he later in his life will be in Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. So this was a very early scene of an actor who is still actually quite prominent today, is still in films today, things like that. It's quite funny to watch him tell off a load of reporters, actually, at one point when they lambast the band. And he swaggers off just that bit too slow. You know when someone is like, and fuck all of y'all, and then slowly walks away like they're being filmed? Like they're clearly being photographed and someone's going to write down, and he told us all to, what an edgy young man. It's kind of like that.
That doesn't sound very... Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, it's just, it's seeing that stereotypical bravado bullshit. You just end up sitting there you roll your eyes at it and have a little chuckle because you know someone like that. Everybody knows someone who would do that sort of stuff. So yeah, they're backing you up, but they're backing you up more so they look good, rather than backing you up because they actually believe or want to back you up.
Oh, okay. So basically, it's a thing of like they're like, let me at him, and they're like, draw.
Yeah, it's very much
like,
that. It's very much
what
that.
are you doing? Hold me back. I'm trying to support you.
Yeah, it's the whole one. The minute you let go of him, it's like, why'd you let go? Yeah, one of them.
Right.
And he's clearly a very young. Actually, mentioning him being very young, for those out there in the know who remembers Live and Kicking, if you were a child of the late 80s and early 90s, you're going to remember Live and Kicking on BBC One in the morning, hosted by Jamie Theakston and Zoe Ball. Zoe Ball is in this film. It's very cute. A very young Zoe Ball, which reminds everybody that she used to be very attractive at one. Well, I'm sure she's still lovely.
I have no idea about that. But yeah.
So she currently, Zoe Ball, I believe, is a radio presenter mainly. But she used to host Top of the Pops. She was a music journalist, basically. And this would have been right at the start of her music journalist career as well. So we see Zoe Ball dressed a little bit like any 90s blonde white chick with spiky hair and slightly off dark makeup and punky, edgy. But it's not punk or edgy. I mean, this is okay. I'm gonna say it well and true. This is a movie for Brits.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But all right, let's we've talked quite a bit about it. Let's get to the scoring. What would you score this movie out of 10?
10. All right,
Like,
okay, not 10.
No,
Okay, so
no room for doubt, or what?
okay, it's one of my favourite films, so I would obviously score it 10 out of 10. However, as an overall film, as a movie experience, I would say it was a 7 or an 8. It's not exactly 10 out of 10 because there is more scope. It could have had a bit more. It could have been a bit bigger here and there. But anyone could have said that of films like The Full Monty, and that won an Oscar. So, you know.
What would you say?
In fact, this did win a Golden Globe. It just didn't get far after that. So,
So, what do you think a person who has no idea of British cinema or British movies, basically they've watched Love Actually once and nothing else?
I still think they'll be fine. I think it's that sort of film where the acting caliber, the music, the beat structure, people will still get. It's a bit like nowadays a lot of Americans are going back and they are watching shows like Monty Python and things like that, and they definitely reference things that no one, I mean, even in the UK now, a lot of people of, say, our generation and younger generations, they're not going to get those references unless they go away and Google it. And it's that similar sort of thing, where if there is a reference that you don't necessarily get, you just go away and Google it. But you can live without doing that.
Okay. Okay. So for you, you'd basically call this a perfect film?
Yeah.
Okay. So hearing your explanation of it, honestly, it sounds really freaking depressing.
It's really not. I'm clearly, if it's sounding depressing, then I'm completely misselling it. It's not depressing because it's uplifting. It's
like it honestly sounds like the way you were describing it. It honestly sounded like 4 people at the end of their rope, and they're rickety and crotchety, and arthritis filled, and they're basically slowly going towards the finish line, and somehow they get there.
Well, no, because it's not about them reaching the finish line. That was the Best Marigold Hotel, that film, if you're about oldies reaching the finish line. This is more... They all gave up on their dream. Now, obviously, neither of us are quite there yet, but a lot of middle-aged men will recognise the characters in this film. And the reason is, a lot of those men are dads who wish they were in rock bands. Or some of them even were dads who were in rock bands that didn't go very far at this point. Especially anyone who was of rock band age, so between 18 and 24, in the 80s or the 90s. So anyone that was that age, who's getting a bit rickety and cantankerous now, is going to see themselves in these characters. They had to give up their dream because other things came up. So, for instance, the guitarist Les, played by Jimmy Now, he gave up the dream, married the love of his life, had kids, and started a roofing business. So he just basically went from very rich to comfortable. And a lot of people can recognise that because some people who were in 80s bands, like one-hit wonder bands, that's how they've survived. They've just lived off the royalties of what they made in the 80s and lived comfortably, probably in Richmond. A lot of them probably live in Richmond. I don't know why, but Richmond, London is home of the old rockers from bands like Dead or Alive or Adam Ant and things like that. Did really well, had a flurry, and then just live off the royalties for the rest of their life. Then you've got characters that are trying to be younger than they actually are, and one of the best parts of the movie is when Ray, the lead singer, admits that it's his birthday coming up. and everyone just assumes he's 50. And he gets to a point where he's like, I'm not 50. I'm not 50! He probably is 50, but it's that I don't want to grow up. So let's give this another go. Can we do it? Now that we've all learned a little more, we've had some life experience, can we actually do this? And it's the fact that, actually, now you've all got your fingers out your ass, you've lived a life, and you've had to go through a lot of hardships, and now you come back and you're even stronger. So it's that sort of idea.
Alright, so we're doing kind of Space Cowboys type of
To be honest, yeah.
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 Or
Wild Hogs, where they all decide that they were all younger and they all used to have motorbikes when they were younger, but then they became adults and had adult lives, and then they decide in their 50s, let's all get motorbikes again and go off on an adventure. It's that sort of film.
Alright, fair enough. Alright, so
Just with guitars.
I'd say hearing it, I'm not against watching it, but at the same time, it's a really mood type of film. Like, you need to be in the right mood to watch it. I don't think it's the type of movie that you can put on in an evening or in an afternoon and just watch it right off the cuff. So I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
Fair enough. I mean, I would say this is a primetime film. This is the sort of film that if anyone grew up with a television and the BBC, we would be getting after EastEnders at like 8 o'clock at night. On BBC One. It's that sort of film. It's a family film, and they're going to pop it on as the evening winds down so that you can just enjoy a little, movie.
I don't think people know what EastEnders is.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I don't think people.
Remember, it's on BBC America, and
I don't want to know.
Okay. Okay, any generic soap opera. Insert the name of the soap opera that would be on at the height of family time in the evening. In the UK, we have EastEnders, Coronation Street, and Emmerdale. There are key ones.
Yeah. I used to watch Neighbours when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was one of them as well. I mean, for some reason in the UK they aired it at a different time to Australia. Over here they'd air it at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whereas in Australia it would be on at like 6 in the evening.
Yeah. Well,
yes, that sort of show. It would be a film after that.
Alright. Very well. TV movie of the week. Which is fair enough.
Yeah, basically.
Alright, so...
It should have been more.
Well, that's the unfortunate side effect of being a British film from the 90s. Lack of budget really
very much is.
And good writing, but no real hook to keep you in. Like, you really have to kind of invest yourself in the film to make it through.
Plus, we were moving towards an era, like, especially in 99, turn of the century, we were moving towards different types of films. We were moving away from that sort of, gentle cinema, I suppose.
Well, The Matrix had that effect on people at the time.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to be the next Matrix and, kind of bring people into the cinema and, be smart sci-fi, even though smart sci-fi doesn't really exist anymore. But I digress. Anyways, thank you very much, Hippie, for your movie review. And... Yes?
No.
Did you want to say anything?
No.
What? Are you gonna get moody? What? Are you gonna get moody now? I thought that was my thing.
You put the movies... You put the word movie, you put it into quotation marks, dude. Dude.
Okay.
You verbally put quotation marks around the word movie. This is a movie.
Yeah, it's a movie. What do you want? Like, The Room's a movie. What do you want me to say?
Oh, God, yeah. You're actually right. The Room is a movie.
Alright, we're going to stop it there. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next time where I will find a movie that Hippie hasn't seen before, and it will not be British and it will not be from the 90s. I'll try and make it a little more exciting so we can talk about it. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll have Bill Nighy in it. He's done a couple of really good movies, like, in the 2000s.
Told you.
So,
Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, his movie career really skyrocketed. Noughties onwards.
Yeah. Alright. Thank you very much for listening, and take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.